the Sportsline Podcast on the CHCH and Parrot media platforms. I'm Bubba O'Neil. As most of you know, this podcast is a space to highlight the outstanding athletes, coaches, broadcasters from Southern Ontario, and in particular, the Golden Horseshoe. Today, our primary focus, even though it's 45 degrees outside, it's junior hockey. According to TSN Hockey insider and analyst Bob McKenzie, this individual has prodigious talent and boundless potential. Quite a compliment for this Stoney Creek native who groomed his skills with the Hamilton Junior Bulldogs and the Halton Hurricanes. 2 years later, Erie Otters defenseman Matthew Schaefer is the consensus first overall pick of the upcoming NHL draft, and his talent was obvious to see, even in his rookie junior year of 2023.
Sobolev back to Schaefer, so we'll see the rookie run the power play here with four forwards. Schaefer faking, steps into one and scores! The first career OHL goal for Matthew Schaefer is on the power play, and Erie opens the scoring.
Well, the fine voice of that amazing call joins us on the Sportsline Podcast. Good friend of the podcast, Steve Clark. As I said, it's 90 degrees outside, but we're talking hockey, and there really is a lot of hot topics to really discuss. And in my opinion, a lot of this stuff is right up your alley, so we bring you in.
Oh, I really appreciate it, and this is the most fun, I guess, part of the off-season, the week before the draft, and then, of course, with free agent frenzy coming up on July the 1st. So I'm happy to come in and talk to the NHL draft is kind of like, one of my Super Bowls. I love it.
And I think,
everything about it.
Is it fair to say, too, just on the wide spectrum before we get into Matthew Schaefer, is because whether it be players with the Niagara Icedogs or the other teams that you've called games against, you've seen the development and growth of so many of these players.
Yeah, absolutely. And a live viewing of a talented player is like no other, because you do see things that you can't necessarily see on TV, or if you're listening in the radio, or even if you're in the crowd. But if you have that vision, that look, I remember one of the first OHL games I did was I filled in for in Oshawa for the Oshawa Generals, and it was John Tavares playing for the Oshawa Generals. And just to watch him, you could tell a level above everybody else. Talented junior hockey players, but there was Tavares, and he was above everybody else. His vision, the way he made passes, the way he skated, shot the puck, it was just different.
Let's talk about Matthew Schaefer, the Stoney Creek product, who is expected to be selected first overall by the New York Islanders. And first of all, as you say, you just saw that first goal. Could you tell at that point that he was a level above and maybe going to be a first overall pick?
Well, I'm not sure if I could predict that he was going to be a first overall pick, but a level above, I would absolutely say yes, because in that OHL draft, right, he was picked right before Ryan Robrick, who was picked by the Icedogs, and everybody thinks he's going to be a top 5 pick next year. Uber primo talent. And so Schaefer, a defenseman, usually takes a little bit longer for them to get acclimated to the Ontario Hockey League. It's a difficult position to play if you're 16 years old and playing against drafted guys and then guys who are up to 20 years old. But you could tell with Schaefer again, and it's just the vision, the head up, the look, the scanning of the ice, and how he can see other people. And I believe I can't remember, I might have mentioned this guy's going to quarterback power play for years, and you could see in that goal. And if I want to channel my inner Ed Burkholder and break down that goal, it's not just a shot from the slot, it's how he got there. The little head fake, the Ice Dog player totally bought it, and then boom, gets the shot through. And it was one of those goals in which you looked and you said, wow, this kid is talented. Now, I will say, ironically, his brother Jonathan Schaefer, I called his first OHL goal, too. He was playing in the playoffs for the Ice Dogs against the Barrie Colts when the Ice Dogs made their run to the final, and he played one game in the playoffs, and he scored. And then he became an Ice Dog for a couple years afterwards. So, yeah, I've got both the Schaefers on my highlight reel.
That's fantastic. That's what a great story that is. I had actually forgotten about that. And let me ask you, and I know they're different positions, but I'm sure you maybe even met the family something a little bit like is there any similarities at all? I know, as I said, one's a defenseman, one's a forward, but obviously Matthew's talked about like that guy's my hero. That's who I look up to.
Mm-hmm. Well, John played some defense too. Johnny played some defense as well, and kind of split between forward. And from what I know, the two personalities of these boys are alike. Very, very outgoing, very, very well spoken, very, very articulate, very, very comfortable in talking with adults. And people that age, sometimes they're not that comfortable, and you get mumbled cliches, right? You've seen the interviews that Matthew Schaefer has done, whether it's with, TSN or Sportsnet or whoever, and you see how he comes across in terms of the personal tragedy that he has endured. His brother, just like that. Just remember him being very, very, outgoing and well-spoken. And my guess, it wouldn't surprise me. Johnny, I think he played 3 or 4 years for Brock. Wouldn't surprise me to see him accompany Matthew, maybe to Long Island when they get drafted as that mentor, and maybe they live together. Who knows, right?
Well, let's go here first. I talked to Matthew on the phone, on my cell phone on Monday, and he called me. I'd left a message with the family to get him on the Sportsline Podcast, and I'll let you know, folks, he will be here after the draft, which we're really excited about to talk to him. So he calls me and says, "Oh, hello, Bubba, Mr. O'Neil."
I was going to ask if he called you Mr. O'Neil.
Mr. O'Neil. And then I said, "Hello." He goes, "It's Matthew Schaefer calling." And here I am. I got goosebumps, and a 17-year-old is calling me on my cell phone, right? But you're right. The way he presented himself, the way he talked to me, I thought to myself exactly what you thought. And now it's always the greatest worry of sometimes when I have younger athletes right here on this show is that some of them, the cameras come on, they get all clammy. And he was as smooth talking and mature sounding, yes sir, no sir, like all of it. It was unbelievable. I had to tell him, stop it with the sir. You're making me feel old, right? But it was like one of those situations where you say to yourself at the end of the call, boy, there's a kid that was brought up right.
Yeah, absolutely.
To your point, though, about being brought up, and you talked about the personal tragedy, there's a lot of people that don't know his story. It's coming out a little bit more with some features that have been done by the National Hockey League, Sportsnet, TSN. There are probably people listening and watching this podcast that don't really know. Maybe you can just kind of touch on a couple of things that this kid at 17 years old has gone through.
Well, yeah, he in the space of a very, very short amount of time, he lost his mom to breast cancer. And, young, right? I believe late 40s, maybe early 50s. One of his biggest fans, championed both of the boys, played hockey with the boys as well, came out. I believe the story was she actually played goal, so both the boys could shoot on her, and just was, a very, very special lady. And from what I heard, had kind of like, there was a remission, but then things went the other way, and the Schaefer family lost their, mom and wife. And then just to compound that, the Billet family he was living with, the lady, a local reporter in Erie, took her own life. And I know that he had become close with that family. So, when you have two devastating losses and the method in which they were lost in that short amount of time, and you can still come out and be articulate and smile and talk about your mom and honor your mom and your billet mom, I will call her, then again, strength of character is something, off the charts. And there are certain guys you just root for.
That's a great point.
Root for.
That's a great point. And everything I've seen, everything I've read, and how he honors both of his moms, I'll call it, is amazing to me. And he doesn't shy away from discussing it. He actually celebrates his mothers. And I'm not even a parent, and I know you are, to a hockey goaltender.
Yes.
And it's got to be special to see that and feel that.
It really is. And you know, I get a little emotional just kind of even like considering and thinking and of how he, you know, honors his mom and talks about her and is able to speak, you know, about her. I mean, I lost my mom, and I have trouble speaking, you know, about her because it was a tremendous loss, you know, for our family. So to see somebody at this age with this maturity, I mean, he's 17 years old. He's an uber talented hockey player, and he has the demeanor of like somebody who's in his early to mid 30s, that maturity level. I was listening to a podcast, and at the prospects, the OHL prospects game that was in Brantford, the one podcast co-host Dan Mahar said that his team, who I believe like house league players, U16 house league players, you know, went to Brantford and got to meet the top prospects and just came away raving about Matthew Schaefer, about how down to earth he was, how interested he was, and those things mean a lot to people coming up. It's the little things that mean a lot to people and to fans and to people who approach you, and how you deal with them just shows the type of person that you are. And Matthew Schaefer he just keeps showing that character, you know, every single time you see him on the TV and every single time you hear him. It's something. I don't think there's been a number one pick like this, to tell you the truth.
No, I don't think so, because it's always like computer hockey guy.
Yeah.
And I know you said the standard answers, you know, the learning the media, like all of that. It's very, very regimented. And what I'm feeling from this kid that goes to Newman High School and Stoney Creek, and you know, and has had the tragedies and the successes that he's about to, you know, and he's come through injury as well too.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the shoulder, like it's amazing. Let me ask you this: does his game as a defenseman, and as you said, it is true, defensemen tend to take a little bit longer to develop in the junior hockey levels and in the National Hockey League, but does his game parlay to being a number one or number two defenseman in the upper levels? It
really does, because the one thing you don't realize about him is that, and I didn't realize it about him either because I think he's had a growth spurt, is that he's 6'2", and he's about 185, 190. So he's a solidly built, reasonably tall defenseman who can play his position well. And he plays his position defensively well enough. Like, he's not going to be like the total one-way person. Now, I mean, some people, I heard somebody making a Cale Makar comparison. I don't think he's as flashy and brilliant and dynamic as Cale Makar. The comparison I heard, which I think should make him smile even more, is Scott Niedermayer.
Wow.
Right. And, you know, you remember, again, somebody who was 6'1", 6'2", just a very astute hockey player, high hockey IQ, could play both sides of the ice, very, very articulate and a winner. You remember, like, Scott Niedermayer would put on his glasses for interviews after a game, and he looked like this bookish professor. It was so like Greg Maddux as well, like one of these guys you don't expect to be an athlete, and there they are. So I hear the Scott Niedermayer comparisons, and I think they're really good. Now, I think, in my opinion, because he only played 21 games last year between the OHL, the World Juniors, and the Prospects Challenge against the United States, it wouldn't surprise me to see him come back to junior hockey just to get more actual game action and reps, but I mean, that's to be determined by the Islanders and Erie.
I'm all for this. I think there's just this amazing rush, and I feel sorry for Bedards and guys like this that come in with all this kind of hype, and then all of a sudden, even though I understand for the Blackhawks, they were a team that weren't going anywhere, might as well get them to the pros. I understand that mentality, but boy, it can be a rough ride for a lot of these kids, right? And like, junior hockey, play another year, mature, enjoy playing hockey, knowing that there's a next level waiting for you, right? I'm all for that. Let's have a look at the final Central Scouting top 10.
Yep.
And I know you know a lot of these names, and as I talk about, a lot of these guys are going to be expected to be at the next level. I look at a Jake O'Brien, who with the Brantford Bulldogs, who it continues to impress me. When you look at that list, are all those guys going to be in the National Hockey League?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because look at all those are top 10 potential picks. And this is a great year for the Ontario Hockey League, by the way. 5 of the top 10 players listed there are Ontario Hockey League players. And I think they could have 9 drafted in the first round, depending on how the lower half shakes out. Like you took a look, Michael Misa, player of the year, 60-goal scorer, and has already played, I believe, 3 OHL seasons because he came in as the special player. He started playing at age 15. So he's going to be outstanding. I think San Jose is just stockpiling prospects like nobody's business. Jake O'Brien is one of the more polarizing guys in the draft. And that's something for somebody who could be in the top 10 because they say his points are inflated because a lot of them are Nick Lardis motivated and a lot of them are power play motivated. I tend to more disagree than agree because I think the skill set with Jake O'Brien is really, really good. And I think he'll have an outstanding season this year, without Nick Lardis. He's just that talented. But I've heard, a couple of things about him that the people are making people hesitate. And it's the same with, Keyshawn Aitchison. I've seen him, he's my favorite player, I think, in the first round.
Wow.
And he just about destroyed one of the Ice Dogs in the Barrie series, Ivan Gallianoff, with a brutal open ice body check. But here's somebody who scored 26 goals from the defense position.
Wow.
And is physical as well, but can be a little bit erratic defensively. Well, you know what? Everybody's going to have a little bit of a negative thing attached to their game. I mean, even Matthew Schaefer will have something. So he's one of the ones, I think, who is a little bit of the diamond in the rough. And once they draft and develop him, and again, I think he'll come back to junior hockey. I can't remember the last time an 18-year-old defenseman stepped right into the National Hockey League. It might have been Jamie Drysdale, who was ironically an Erie Otter as well. And then Porto Martone is just, one of those guys. He was actually tabbed as a number 1 pick at one point. Over 90 points, power forward type, just the type of player any NHL team loves. There you go.
I think that's amazing because guys, they come up and down that list, and people forget it's a list.
Yes.
Right? And I know it's NHL Central Scouting. It is the best scouts in the world, too. But Tom Brady was picked in the 6th round.
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
So we always have to kind of balance this out. And there's always guys maybe that are in the bottom end of maybe even a top 20 list that may end up being the best prospect ever picked, right? And it's a steal for a team. I think that's the wonderful part about really any draft, right? We get these sort of aspects. Your expertise is the Niagara Icedogs, and I'm going to start here. There's been a lot going on with the Niagara Icedogs since you and I were last chatting on the podcast. A lot has gone on. Let's start with the cultural review and cleaning of house. Your thoughts on what happened there?
Well, because I didn't know everything that was obviously going on, I read what was in the newspaper and everything like that. I was saddened to see Ben Boudreau let go. I don't know what his role was, how complicit he was, what he knew, what he didn't know. But just as a person talking to him, the hockey pedigree, I thought he was a good hockey man, and he had done really well with the Ice Dogs in the first half of the season. Dan Paillet, again, right? Another outstanding hockey person.
Welland guy.
And, Welland, absolutely. Mark Slauson, great record as a minor hockey coach. So I was sad to see those guys go. Dan McKean, I think his last name was the video guy. Super people. So I was sad to see them go. But, if you're doing a cultural review, you may as well start from scratch. So they backed off Darren Dadobler from day-to-day operations. And, so now they're basically putting the pieces back together, and it's much about hockey players on the ice and getting good character people, the Matthew Schaefer types, off the ice, so they could be solid, productive citizens, and you don't have to read nonsense about movie theater stuff and other things that happened with the players and the team.
Now, and the reason why I bring this up with you is because I kind of thought we went through this already. The whole Burke family situation, who, God bless them, they brought junior hockey to the Niagara region, and a real good franchise, and a franchise that's supported. And then it went haywire. And I understand why the OHL did what they did. Yeah. And they decided to move on. But when I thought Darren Dadobler came in there, I thought, here we go. It's a fresh start. but then kind of the same stuff happened all over again. It's just, and I'm not looking to poke at the owner here, because I think it's wonderful that he's paying the bills, we'll say, right? But is it lack of hockey experience, or like not knowing how to put together a franchise? Why are we in a rebuild all over again?
You know, my theory is, and it's just a theory, I mean, he owned the Brantford 99ers and some other minor hockey league teams. Those are pay-to-play leagues, right? The players pay to play in those leagues, and in return, they get all the opportunity, usually take the NCAA route. The OHL is a completely different animal. The players, we could talk till the cows come home about stipends and how much money these guys should get and what they should get. But the bottom line is they're not paying. You give them some money, right? And then you have more aggressive agents to deal with and NHL teams to deal with and things like that. So I just think that it's two totally different tiers and two totally different ways of running a franchise, from the OJHL to the Ontario Hockey League. Then I think he made his biggest mistake by naming himself the general manager. And, you know, the owner / GM, I mean, that's Jerry Jones. And he is not without controversy. Mm-hmm. You know, George Steinbrenner seemed to meddle a lot in New York Yankee affairs. And then that's when the trades started coming. He started desperately trying to remake the franchise with trades. And most of those kind of went sideways as well. So then you're starting off kind of like 3 steps behind everybody else. The first season was, you know, a disaster on the ice with 12-13 wins. And then inevitably when people get frustrated on the ice, sometimes the off-ice stuff comes. Right. And then now you're cycling through coaches and you're trying to find that right mix. And you're trying to fix something overnight that normally takes a while to do. And they said the mistakes got compounded, and then great first half this year. We thought, okay,
they were unbelievable.
We've kicked out. We're through to the other side. We've got Kevin He, we've got Ryan Robrick, we've got Ethan Zada, we've got Brady Wasslin, Owen Flores, great goaltender, and then obviously off the ice again it went sideways, and then on the ice it really went sideways. Yeah,
I mean, was there not like draft picks that said I'm not coming there?
They had you know what, they had a good record in the 2 or 3 years since Sam Dickinson. Ironically, they drafted Sam Dickinson, and he didn't report, and so they traded him to London for a bunch of draft picks. But since then, or until this year, they'd had a pretty good run. Like Ryan Robrick committed, Ethan Zada, committed. Mm-hmm. They had no problem getting Brady Wasslin, who people said was the best overall player in the OHL draft, committed. Max Crete, who they just traded to London, he was the second-round pick, committed. So they'd had a good record in getting players to commit until this year. As of right now, I don't think anybody is committed yet. And that's something that the GM and the coach, that's where their work has to come, getting these guys to commit and getting these guys to buy in.
Now, where are we right now in terms of hockey operations?
Well, they have the general manager is Frank Avola, comes with an outstanding pedigree, scouted with Oshawa for a number of years, director of scouting, I believe, with the Windsor Spitfires, who were one of the model franchises in the Ontario Hockey League and helped build up that team. So looks like they've got a solid, albeit inexperienced general manager. He has never been a GM in the Ontario Hockey League, but he's made some trades already, and the trades look like they've made a lot of sense so far. There haven't been big trades, but they've been trades, trading players out, bringing players in, trading draft picks. I think he's done well. The new head coach is former NHLer Chris Barch, and again, somebody who hasn't coached at the Ontario Hockey League level. Coach minor midget, U16, his son Kane, I believe, was a first-round pick of Kitchener, was on that team, and then he worked in scouting and coaching with the Sabres for a number of years. And what I like about Chris Barch is that somebody who came through, played all 4 or 5 years in the OHL in London, and then spent 5 or 6 years at the American Hockey League before he got to the National Hockey League and became really the ultimate role player. Like, a tough, hard-nosed, fourth-line type guy.
I was just going to say that.
I wouldn't say like super, like, John Cordick goon-like, to use a dated, enforcer reference, but certainly, somebody who played a tough brand of hockey, and hopefully that carries over to the Ice Dogs. A friend of mine, Matt Young, pointed out to me, though, he goes, this is the 5th coach that Darren Dadobalar has hired, and all 5 of them have been first-time OHL coaches. It's interesting, and I don't say that, a lack of experience doesn't mean that you're going to not become a coach. Look at, Martin St. Louis in Montreal, right, as an example. So, but, they're untested, and they've got a big job ahead of them.
Well, let's. I said this to you in a couple of podcasts ago. I love it when we don't have Hamilton any longer, but we still have the Brantford Bulldogs, and to see Niagara and that rivalry, I think it's a beautiful thing. The fact that they share the Dogs logo name, right? It's just an amazing thing, and we want Niagara to be good. And to see Niagara get out to that first half, which was, like I said, nationally ranked, if I remember correctly.
They were, yeah.
This was great to see. And then I kind of felt like here we go again when we were talking about them in the second half, and great to see them make the playoffs, right? And it was a tough draw for them as well too. But hopefully there's some building to come upon that. This week we've had the Hall of Fame announcements at the Hockey Hall of Fame, which, for me as a Sabres fan, to me it's spotlighted by, finally, after a 16-year wait, Alex Mogilny. Now, the rest of the class, unbelievable. Really, one of the best I've seen in some time in the first ballot Hall of Famers, and Joe Thornton, Duncan Keith, and Zdeno Chara. Hall of Famers. And then you're going down the list into the coaches and the builders and so-and-so and Botterill. Unbelievable class, really, of 8 people that's going in there. But I think right now, which I find interesting, is that there's a lot of conversation about who's not in. And Carey Price would be the one player that a lot of people are talking about. Now, there's some arguments there, too, that he's still getting a paycheck from the Montreal Canadiens, so maybe there's something there. But the one person that keeps coming up, and it's becoming more and more of a conversation every time of this time of the year, he's now 91 years old, and that's Don Cherry.
Yeah.
Complicated figure to discuss when we bring up hockey. Didn't have the best exit from Sportsnet at the time. But it would be argued that it was must-see, and I don't say this lightly, must-see intermission viewing for so many people. And I don't think, because a lot of people right now, once the end of the period, they're gone to their fridge and they're doing other things, picking up the phone. But you, in between the first period and the second period, on a Hockey Night in Canada broadcast on the old CBC, and even near the end on Sportsnet, you want to know what Grapes had to say. Your thoughts, and please feel free to say what you want about Don Cherry. Is he a Hockey Hall of Famer?
1,000% yes. And a couple things. First of all, when Ed Burkholder and we do our first period intermissions, I play the straight man, the Ron McLean setup type. And Ed is not nearly as controversial as Don Cherry, but his enthusiasm and the way he approaches the game and the way he breaks down the game is a lot how Grapes was. So we kind of modeled ourselves a little bit after that dynamic. Of course, we're not going to match it, but we modeled so that there's that. I loved watching Coach's Corner. So there's that. But Don Cherry is a many-faceted person when it comes to hockey, right? The debate goes in, should he go in the broadcaster's wing, the Foster Hewitt Award, or can he go in as a builder? And I think there's arguments for both. I mean, here's somebody who was a relatively successful coach with the Boston Bruins, a successful entrepreneur with the Rock'em Sock'em videos, the Don Cherry restaurants, all the books that he co-authored and was a part of. He was his own brand, really. And then you get into the Hockey Night in Canada stuff. And to me, he changed the way that intermissions were viewed, right? It used to be play the organ music in the arena, bathroom break, let's look at some highlights, let's talk to a player and get some cliches, and back we go. But then for 8 minutes on Saturday night, there was Don Cherry, and yes, you wanted to hear what he said. As for the politics, Bubba, I'm somebody right now who could care less what people's politics are. I'll make a judgment based on what they're doing in front of me. right? If you came out and we started arguing about politics, I could care less. Like, I honestly could care less about and I know the controversy, and I know why people don't like him. But we're in the entertainment business in as much as the sports analysis business. And Don Cherry was both an entertainer and he was a broadcaster who was must-see TV.
The one thing I will always say about Don Cherry, whether we get into the deep of, some of the terminology he tended to use at times, especially earlier more so, meaning against French people, against people that wore visors. His vocabulary at times was pretty old school.
Yes.
But I also would say it represented an era of our lives that we have lived through where that kind of slang talk was acceptable.
Yep.
Now, he got really old, and we can say with honesty, and I think a lot of families can say this, that our older parents or even grandparents, they get to a certain age and they're just not going to change.
Yeah.
Now, I blame the television. I blame CBC. I blame even Sportsnet for not saying, we're going to rein you in a little bit. You can't have you say this. We can't have you say this. And they allowed Don Cherry, in my opinion, to get so big as a character that he was not going to change.
Yeah.
So you had to stop this early.
Yeah.
Right before he turned into the monster, if you want to call it that. But I will also say this: no one, I don't think anyone waved the Canadian flag and supported Canadian pride. We don't do that very well in this country.
No, we don't.
We're getting better. Especially with this 51st state stuff. We're getting better. But no one was willing to stand up for that flag, at least in the sports world, and especially because it's hockey and we always will consider it ours, than Don Cherry. And for that, he should be rewarded.
He legit would get broken up and emotional talking about soldiers, or whoever it was. Maybe it was even a police officer who had passed away in the line of duty, and that was genuine emotion when he talked about them. So I'm fully on board with that. And listen, I don't support what he's, this is what happened. And I don't want to get into a news podcast either, but this is what happens in our polarizing world. If I say I support Don Cherry, then automatically I'm placed into a box.
Yep.
I don't support what he said, but he said it. It's out there. We knew that he was one controversy away likely from being let go. And when he said what he said, that one night on Hockey Night in Canada, I looked at my wife and we looked at each other and we're like, and I said, he's done. Because they won't stop until they get him. And they did. Now we're at a point now, he's 91 years old. They say his podcast, some reports are saying it's done. He came out in the Toronto Sun and said, I was just saying I was done this year. So who knows, right? There might be just one more little controversy that Don Cherry wants to kind of magnify and create. But to me, he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think in the builders category, or as you said, even in the broadcast part, I don't think as a coach, a failure was probably the biggest thing that he was known for, the too many men on the ice at the Forum that caused Guy Lafleur to score a goal, which is in the Stanley Cup final, I think 76-77. I was kind of the things he got more famous for, because when he went to Colorado with the Rockies, wasn't good times, right? No. So, but as a broadcaster, as someone that promoted the sport, I'm going to tell you this. I mean, and you and I have so many highlights in our broadcasting careers. One that I don't really talk about that much anymore because it was so long ago was in my cable TV days. There was a lacrosse tournament. He was a good friend with a guy in Oakville that ran these lacrosse tournaments, and he showed up for his buddy. That's another thing. He always showed up for his friends to promote whatever was going on. He showed up at Oakville Arena, old Oakville Arena, which is now rebuilt and stuff. And he was kind of the feature guy, shaking hands, talking to a lot of kids. And I pulled him aside. I said, hey, can we do a little chat? Whatever. And he said, absolutely. We did a chat. And I said, and I brought on camera, I said this. I said, let's have a coach's corner. And he just started giggling. And I talked to him for about 5 minutes. I got it on a VHS tape somewhere. I really should,
Convert it. That footage has to come to light.
Yeah,
has to.
Yeah, and it's just I can just see it. But like thinking to myself, talking to Tom Sherry, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I appreciate your candor and your honesty on that, because it really is it's a touchy subject for a lot of people.
It really is. A lot of people would just rather he never be mentioned on social media or ever again. Others are hardcore supporters, and then I think there are people like you and I who are, you're more obviously full-time in the business. I'm freelance in the business, who appreciate and are able to see Don Cherry for who he is. So, and in an era and a time in which Sportsnet is getting some flack for their presentation of first intermissions and it being a little bit flat and predictable and mixing in too many personalities, and they're starting a new big 12-year deal or whatever it is after next year, they need to find that Don Cherry type who can be entertaining but also cater to the hockey fan.
I want to close it out on this here. We don't know. I mean, there's going to be a full season to talk about this. You were actually the person that alerted me on social media about this being the finale season for one Joe Bowen.
Yeah.
Your thoughts as a hockey broadcaster?
Joe Bowen, one of my great influences. There's four guys who I really, really loved. Bob Cole, Joe Bowen, Tom Cheek, Rick Jenneret, all part of being around in this area. Right? So Joe Bowen, to me, in that era in which you did listen to the radio a lot more, because not all games were on TV and it was just the medium to go to, is that he was the heart, soul, heartbeat, however you want to put it, of the Leafs. Started in the early 80s, and back then the Leafs were terrible in the 80s.
Horrible.
There was some awful,
Horrible.
To the run in 93. To Down Goes Brown, to Bless You Boys.
Oh, bless you, boys.
We're going to Boston, baby. And all those iconic calls. He just left it all out there, and it was a genuine person who just happened to be doing an outstanding job of play-by-play. And that Stanley Cup has eluded him. They've come close. And I would listen. I'd love to see him get one in the last. It would be the storybook way of ending things. But you know what? Your story doesn't end the way that you want it to. Ask Dan Marino, right? Ask Pete DeBoer, right? Ask Corey Perry, right? Who did win a Stanley Cup, but that was almost 20 years ago. So Joe Bowen, to me, it's like, I still turn on the radio, but I also hear Joe's frustration because he's not shy. Of calling games from a studio.
Yeah.
And that's difficult for it. Trust me, I've done it. It's not easy to do. And especially for hockey. So, God bless him. I used to record some of his goal calls for my answering machine. Don't disturb me, the Leaf playoffs are on, and then I play a Joe Bowen call. That's probably showing my age a little bit too, but there you go.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I mean we'll get into this another time. But the fact that he's calling these games from a booth, and look, I'll say this, I might get in trouble. If this was the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, if this was Carolina Hurricanes, and I'm not saying that people don't care about those franchises, but the Toronto Maple Leafs are an original six. And I know they have not won a cup since 1967, but they are one of the brands in not only the National Hockey League, but in all of sports. And to have two men of the quality that call games on the radio, and in Ralphie as well, for them to be not traveling with the team, you don't even have to travel with the team. You can just give them a charter flight or a couple tickets to follow the team.
Yeah.
For them not to be part of the on the road carrying the team, to me is a disgrace. It's a disgrace.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. This is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I get it. Back in the days, these guys had, you said the stipend. They give them $200 a day. You know what? You don't even have to go there anymore.
No.
You don't have to do that. But have them calling the games live at not only Scotiabank Arena, but everywhere else the team is.
Yep.
Like, it can't be that much, can it?
It's silly that the Leafs are in Buffalo and they're not in a booth. not in Ottawa, where you can just hop in the train, first class in the train. It's a lot cheaper than a plane. Montreal, Detroit, you can drive if you want. Pay the gas mileage and pay them on top of that, right? And then, I know it's a big topic for another day. The problem is that they're too good, because you don't notice the difference as much when they're calling a game, from a studio, because you want to do the best that you can. But I thought when Joe misidentified the game-winning goal because he was relying on the TV feed, when Tavares, I think it was, scored against Tampa Bay, I thought that was when, they're going to send him back on the road full time, but they made the choice not to. So now, new ownership of MLSC, who knows what they're going to do. Keith Belly, a media guy, last season.
It'd be nice.
Yep.
If not, it'd be real nice to have cameras following him for like the final season or something like that. I always wish they did something like that with Jennerat, with the Sabres as well too. It'd be nice to have like some type of feature. We all love these features on Netflix and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, one with Joe Bowen doing his final season, I think we'd all watch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dude, always great to have you in on the Sportsline podcast.
Always love to be invited.
And an outstanding hockey conversation as we approach the month of July. It's incredible. I can't wait till free agent frenzy and we can kind of put hockey on the shelf for a little bit. And then you can give your voice a little bit of a rest too and get fired up for what will be another great season, hopefully, for the Niagara Icedogs. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you coming in all the time, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And if you've just seen and heard, we love talking hockey. Yes. And if you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline podcast, you want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you have something to say, we always appreciate your comments for the wonderful people that make the Sportsline podcast possible. Thank you so very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.